This class isn't very useful because it can only represent one particular flight. We need to make the flight number configurable at the point that flight is created. To do that, we need to write an initialization method. If provided, the initialization method is called as part of the process of creating a new object when we call the constructor. The initializer method must be called double_init, delimited by the double underscores used for Python runtime machinery. Like all other instance methods, the first argument to double_init must be self. In this case, we also pass a second argument to double_init, which is the flight number. The initializer should not return anything, it simply modifies the object referred to by self. If you're coming from a Java, C# or C++ background, it's tempting to think of double_init as being the constructor. This isn't quite accurate. In Python, the purpose of double_init is to configure an object that already exists by the time it's called. The self argument is, however, analogous to this in Java, C# or C++. In Python, the actual constructor is provided by the Python runtime system, and one of the things it does is check for the existence of an instance initializer and call it when present. Within the initializer, we assign to an attribute of the newly created instance called _number. Assigning to an object attribute that doesn't yet exist is sufficient to bring it into being. Just as we don't need to declare variables until we create them, neither do we need to declare object attributes before we create them. We choose _number with the leading underscore for two reasons. First, because it avoids a name clash with the method of the same name. Methods are functions, functions are objects, and these functions are bound to attributes of the object, so we already have an attribute called number, and we don't want to replace it. Second, there is a widely followed convention that the implementation details of objects which are not intended for consumption or manipulation by clients of the object should be prefixed with an underscore. We also modify our number method to access the _number attribute and return it. Any arguments passed to the flight constructor will be forwarded to the initializer, so to create and configure our flight object, we can now do this. We can also directly access the implementation details. Although this is not recommended for production code, it's very handy for debugging and early testing. If you're coming from a bondage and discipline language like Java or C# with public, private, and protected access modifiers, Python's everything is public approach can seem excessively open-minded. The prevailing culture among Pythonistas is that we're all consenting adults here. In practice, the leading underscore convention has proven sufficient protection even in large and complex Python systems we have worked with. People know not to use these attributes directly, and in fact they tend not to. Like so many doctrines, lack of access modifiers is a much bigger problem in theory than in practice. It's good practice for the initializer of an object to establish so-called class invariants. The invariants are truths about the objects of that class that should endure for the lifetime of the object. One such invariant for flights is that the flight number always begins with an uppercase two-letter airline code followed by a 3 or 4-digit route number. In Python, we establish class invariants in the double_init method and raise exceptions if they can't be attained. We use string slicing and various methods of the string class to perform validation. For the first time in this course, we also see the logical negation operator, not. Ad hoc testing in the REPL is a very effective technique during development. If we construct a flight with a valid flight number, everything works as expected. However, if that flight number doesn't have an airline code, we get a value error. Likewise, if the airline code is lowercase, we get a value error. And if we construct a flight that has letters instead of numbers, we get another value error. And if we try to use 5 numbers instead of 4, we also get a value error. Now that we're sure of having a valid flight number, we'll add a second method to return just the airline code. Once the class invariants have been established, most query methods can be very simple.